that victims will fight for more from the Boy Scouts insurance companies. A representative for the survivors calls the deal a significant step in shifting the focus of the reorganization efforts to give victims a stronger voice in the process. In Washington, I'm Amy Morris, Bloomberg Radio.
There is plenty of pent-up demand for travel coming out of this pandemic. AAA's Josh Zuber says higher gas prices are not much of a deterrent for the 4th of July holiday.
We're actually anticipating pre-pandemic levels for travel, especially when we talk about traveling by car.
Zuber says more than 47.7 million Americans are expected to take to the roads and skies this weekend. The Biden administration is reportedly planning to require airlines refund fees on checked bags if the bags get seriously delayed. The proposal would also require refunds for fees on extras like internet access if the airline fails to provide the service. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take. I'm Nancy Lyons.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week on this Friday edition of the Business Week show, and Charlie Pellet is joining me. Hey, Charlie, we're starting to see a trend here when it comes to junior bankers on Wall Street.
Indeed. Citigroup just the latest saying, yep, we're going to increase annual base salaries for junior bankers. Latest Wall Street lender to try to retain younger staff facing burnout from working long hours during the pandemic. And why, Carol Masser, does this all sound so familiar?
Because we've seen it before. JP Morgan, Bank of America, they're all doing it. We know it's been a busy M&A year, and these firms are making a ton of money on doing these deals, and so they want to make sure that they hold on to their investment banking staff, whether it's senior, or whether it's mid-level, or whether it's junior bankers. So Citi specifically increasing salaries for program vice presidents, analysts, and associates in its banking, capital markets, and advisory unit. This according to a memo to its staff that was seen by Bloomberg News. The raises range, Charlie, from $15,000 to $25,000, and under the changes, a first-year analyst base salary will now be about $100,000, according to a person familiar with the matter who asked not to be identified, discussing pretty private information.
Exactly. But, you know, it's worth revealing these numbers simply because for our listeners across the country, I mean, obviously here at Bloomberg and here in New York City, we're very tapped into these kinds of numbers. But for our listeners across the country, some might be surprised that, you know, a first-year analyst can pull down $100,000 if things don't work out at Citigroup. You've got JP Morgan Chase, or try down the block to Barclays, and those are the jobs that are available. But I got to tell you, anybody who works on Wall Street, stress is the common theme here. Citigroup also says it's going to continue to focus on wellness initiatives in the division, making sure that staff have enough time off through the weekend and are also protected on holiday weekends.
Yeah, the unit's also actively supporting the bank's hybrid work model. Citi has been definitely out there in terms of embracing alternative ways of working, in contrast to some of the other big banks on Wall Street. Jane Fraser, of course, the CEO there, and talking about the importance of certainly the culture at the bank, but also being open to a more hybrid way of working. Charlie, thank you. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. This is Bloomberg.
events, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Tape. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters. I'm Charlie Huddle. Records on Wall Street. Right to the numbers. We'll give you the why. The jobs report, major catalyst. S&P up 28 now, up 0.7%. The Dow also the record up 152, up 0.4. Nasdaq is rallying 94, up by 0.7%. Nasdaq 100 index up by 1%. 10-year yield right now 1.42%. 10 years up 9.30. Stocks are climbing on speculation. The economy is recovering at a pace that will not make the Federal Reserve imminently take away the liquidity punch bowl that has helped push the market to a record. S&P up for a 7th straight session. Gold up 0.8%, 17.90 the ounce. Bitcoin retreating by 0.2%, 33,367 right now on Bitcoin. West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.2%, 75.11 the barrel. Brent 76.17 barrel of Brent up by 0.4%. A day after the Krispy Kreme IPO, it surged 23% yesterday. Right now, looking at shares of Krispy Kreme, ticker Donut BNUT. They're down by 8.8%. I'm Charlie Huddle. Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thanks so much, Charlie. Well, our most read story, and understandably so, on this Jobs Friday is about that monthly jobs report. U.S. jobs, Charlie talking about it as well, jumping by the most in 10 months, the economy gaining steam, payrolls climbing 850,000 in June, led by, once again, leisure and hospitality jobs. Jobless rate ticking up, too, as workers voluntarily left positions. Let's get a view, though, on hiring and what she is also hearing from her corporate clients. It's why I love talking with her. Irina Novoselsky, she is CEO of Career Builder. For more than 20 years, has been helping companies around the globe hire global workers. She joins us once again on the phone in New York City. Irina, how are you?
Good. How are you doing, Hal?
Doing well, doing well. Looking forward to the long holiday weekend. And we got that jobs report, and it's a reminder that we are continuing to build back after the pandemic.
Yes, and one of the things that I have found so interesting in looking at this data is this is a very different recovery than we've ever really seen in the past. And what I mean by that is supply is 50% higher, given the unemployment is still where it is. We see companies, our clients are posting 30% more than they were pre-COVID. And yet the application rate is 25% down than the average of 3 years before COVID. And we're seeing a 48-year high of open jobs across all segments. So it's this really interesting dynamic that's happening with the labor market.
Yeah, okay. And it's a dislocation. We kind of knew that would happen. Maybe we didn't know to this extent. I think there might have been a belief out there that as soon as things started to reopen, everybody would come rushing back. But it's not that clear, especially if you've got kids out of school and you're still dealing with that. There are still people who maybe haven't gotten the vaccine or who are a little bit nervous still about the virus, as you say, or as we've been reporting. It's just still a lot of issues going on. Do you think in September, as some have suggested, the Labor Secretary, Marty Walsh, talked about it with Bloomberg TV earlier today, that once September happens and kids go back to school, it'll be a different picture?
It'll improve, and you mentioned this, but some of the things that are driving people to stay on the sidelines and not really engage is a mix of taking care of children with hybrid school systems, taking care of elderly is up 7% versus the time before COVID. Retired population is actually up 11% versus before COVID. So there's certain things that are not really related to unemployment benefits or September or a timeline per se. However, there is this big chunk of the population that is just sitting and watching and waiting, and some of it might be COVID fatigue and just waiting to get back in the market. But one of the things that's interesting is if you look at the states, there's about 25 states that have ended their unemployment benefits early, the extended benefits, and there's another 25 that still have them. So it's turned out to be a very great A/B testing model. And we're actually seeing that the states that have not ended their extended unemployment see more applications. And that really tends to drive towards the answer of perhaps it's going to be a little longer than September to see major change.
Do you anticipate that there will be a point where maybe we get a month where there's 1 million or 2 million that all of a sudden people will come rushing back to work because they kind of have to?
They kind kind of have to. I think the school system, to your point, will help once September comes. But one of the things that's also interesting is wages are starting to go up. And some of the things that we're seeing as incentives, and it's a mix of wages and benefits and just various incentives, whether it's work from home or days off or volunteer days. One of the things that we just saw in our latest career builder survey was that 51% of companies are going to be increasing their minimum wage. Wow. And almost 60% of those are increasing it above $15 an hour.
Wow. Okay. So, and is that across industries?
It's across industries, but you started a little bit this conversation by saying the quit rate is higher.
Yeah.
And the quitting rate is higher on those front end COVID most impacted industries. We saw 50% growth in quit rate in retail. And so one of the things that our clients are really working with us on is not only how do you attract talent, how do you keep the engagement and retain the talent you have? And one of our surveys came back and said that almost 40% are expecting greater than a 5% wage increase this year for employees that are currently employed. And there's a lot of other engagement technologies that our clients are partnering with us just to help drive and really try to mitigate the quit rate that we're seeing out there.
You've watched a lot of labor markets. How does this one stack up?
Well, the interesting thing is that you would expect to see similar recession recovery in the labor market. However, this wasn't a regular recession. It was pandemic-induced, and a lot of it was temporary labor that got pulled out of the workforce. And so it looks like it's really this combination of candidates just having COVID fatigue and sitting there and assessing when does it make sense to come back? When is that balance fit? And coupled with the thing that we're seeing searched for more and more is candidates are being picky on what they come back for. They're looking for all those things on their list that maybe they didn't attribute as much before are prioritizing now. What does the company stand for? What are the company's values? What's the mission? What are the overall benefits? And so it's much more than just a straight job.
I was just talking with a major tech firm, publicly traded, and exactly that point, that the workers, they care about what a company stands for, what the employee benefits, and so on and so forth. There's a lot of almost the employee being in the driver's seat a lot more than they used to be. Irina, great insight, as always. Irina Novoselsky, she's CEO of Career Builder, joining us on the phone in New York City. We're going to get another read on the labor market next week with the JOLT survey, the Job Openings and Labor Turnover Survey. It used to be a favorite of then Fed Chief Janet Yellen, but just gives us an idea of how confident workers are out there. You're listening to Bloomberg.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 1061 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
It's one of the stocks I've been watching today. Virgin Galactic taking off as high as 26% today. A little bit off of that. Still up about 4%. But this is on news that Richard Branson plans to fly to space ahead of Jeff Bezos. We're going to get into that, hear from the CEO of Virgin Galactic in just a moment. First up, though, back to your top business stories and a check on that trading day. Charlie Pellet, he's got his feet firmly planted on business ground.
And here's what's been very jealous of these rockets that are going to be taking off carrying humans into space. I want to do that one day. Here's what's going on. We've got the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all surging today. We're looking at records across the board. Stocks are climbing on speculation. The economy is recovering at a pace that will not make the Federal Reserve imminently take away the liquidity punch bowl that has helped push the market to a record. S&P 500 index, if you're keeping track, and yes, we are here at Bloomberg, that's what we do, up for a 7th straight session, longest winning streak since August. This after data showed U.S. job growth surged the most in 10 months. A topic we're covering today right here on Bloomberg Business Week. S&P up now by 29, higher by 0.7%. The Dow up 155, up by 0.5%. NASDAQ is up 101 now, up by 0.7%. 10-year yields 1.42%. 10-year up 10/30 seconds. NASDAQ 100 index up by 1%. Interesting though, small caps fading today. The Russell 2000 down by 0.7%. Gold up 0.8, 17.91 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.1%, 75.15 a barrel. Bottom line here, U.S. stocks they are at records. With the spread of the more transmissible Delta variant, what might that mean for herd immunity in the United States? Dr. Andrew Pekosh is a professor of molecular microbiology and immunology at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health.
It keeps getting higher and higher as we find variants that are more easily transmitted. We were using the 70% number early in the vaccination campaign. That was before Alpha variant came through, and that was before Delta variant came through. When viruses become more transmissible, the number of vaccinated people we need to reach that herd immunity threshold gets higher and higher.
Dr. Pekosh is with the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, which is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Among some of the vaccine names we track, Pfizer up 0.5%. Its German partner BioNTech, little changed, higher now by less than 0.1%. AstraZeneca up 0.8%. The ADR's Moderna, based in Cambridge, Massachusetts, down 0.7%. J&J Johnson & Johnson up 1.8%. Recapping, S&P down, NASDAQ all at records. S&P up 0.7%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thanks so much. Shares of Virgin Galactic, man, they have gone to the moon this year, nearly doubling. They're up again today. This on news, Richard Branson plans to fly to space on July 1st. That's just days before a similar journey by fellow billionaire Jeff Bezos. Well, our team over on the TV side caught up with Virgin Galactic CEO Michael Colglazier to talk about Branson's plans to fly into space aboard the firm's VSS Unity spacecraft and also preparations to offer customers flights in 2022. He caught up with BTV's Guy Johnson and Kaylee Lines.
It's not important when any of these space flights go. What's important is that they're ready to go. And that's really what you're hearing from us here is we're ready. We had an incredibly successful flight back in May. We'd announced we were going to run a schedule of 4 test flights. The one on May 22nd hit all of our technical objectives. And we did deep analysis and looked across all the ships as we prepared for when the time of the next flight would be. The data that we have been using is also what we sent to the FAA. And the FAA used that as the basis for clearing our commercial license, which we'll use in 22 going forward. But technically, the ship performed just as we wanted it to do. So now we're going to repeat that flight profile for the remainder of this flight test program.
Okay.
But now the flight test program shifts to the commercial cabin and the private astronaut experience. We've always planned for Richard to be the person to test that private astronaut experience for us. We thought he might do that after we rehearsed it once in space. The truth of it is we actually do most of the training and rehearsals for that on the ground. And so these
Right.
next two flights are going to be exactly the same. And we asked Richard which he'd prefer to be on. You can guess what he said. And so we're excited that he's going to be joining and testing the private astronaut experience for us.
Does this pull forward the timeline for private flight? And what exactly will it cost someone who isn't Richard Branson to take that flight?
So no, there's no pulling forward of our schedule or flight test program here. We are remaining on the exact same schedule we've been. We had announced we would do these next two flights in the summer, and pending the data analysis, which we needed to complete first, we'd always expected internally mid-July was when we would likely be going with the next of these and the first of our commercial cabin crew flights. So that's all the same, and we're going to continue that same test flight program. We do now have a clear license from the FAA to do commercial sales. That won't happen until 22 after we finish the flight test. However, after the second of these next two upcoming flights, as planned, we will be reopening up sales to the marketplace, and we're excited for that moment. That'll be late summer, early fall.
Michael, if I'm going into space, I want to go into space. The common line is the international recognized sort of demarcation point. It's at 62 miles. You guys are going to 55. If I want to go to space, I want to go into space. Why would I go with you? I'm going to get a great view of the curvature of the Earth, but am I really going to be in space?
Well, we go well over the astronaut line. In fact, we're the only private company that's taken private citizens up into space, come back, and been recognized by the U.S. government as private astronauts. So, yes, we are taking you into space undoubtedly, and we're very excited about that. What I would say is Virgin Galactic is focused on bringing you to a place in space to also look back to the planet. And so we are going to do that. It's the entirety of what the vision of the company is built for.
Right.
There are other people out there that are doing lots of other business models that will take you up as well, but this is our business, and we think the view we will give you from space is going to be incredible and life-changing, and that's why we're here.
So how many people have signed up for this? How many customers so far? And what do they need to pay you in order for Virgin Galactic to turn a profit?
So we've had about 600 customers have signed up. We call them future astronauts because they will become astronauts once they fly. And they paid, the last time we had a public price out there was $250,000 a number of years ago. So we have not posted our pricing for when we reopen up sales. That will happen just in advance of when we do open up sales. We expect that will be higher than where it has been in the past as we go forward, but we haven't put that pricing out yet today.
All right, that was Virgin Galactic CEO Michael Koglazer talking with Bloomberg TV's Guy Johnson and Kaylee Lines earlier today. And again, that stock, specifically Virgin Galactic, just on a tear this year. It's nearly doubled. It's up another 4% today. And that news about Richard Branson getting ready to fly into space on July 11th. We're seeing all of those billionaires and their space entities. They are jumping on board. We've seen it with Jeff Bezos, but nonetheless getting a lot of attention, certainly in the investment market today. All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Let's get another check on world and national news. Over to Nancy Lyons in D.C. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. President Biden is encouraged by the fact the U.S. added 850,000 new jobs in June. The numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics come after a disappointing spring for job growth. The president calls the recovery historic progress.
We've now created over 3 million jobs since it took office. More jobs than have ever been created in the first 5 months of any presidency in modern history.
Biden says the U.S. is leading the world in its economic recovery. He also argued that Congress needs to seize the moment by passing the bipartisan infrastructure agreement. The Supreme Court will not hear a case over whether businesses have a right to refuse services for same-sex wedding ceremonies. The case involves a Washington state woman who refused to provide flowers for a same-sex wedding, arguing it violated her religious beliefs. A high court is declining to take up her appeal to a lower court ruling. The FAA has confirmed that a Boeing cargo plane made an emergency water landing off the coast of Honolulu today. Aviation sources say the Boeing 737 cargo plane experienced engine trouble and was attempting to return to the airport. The FAA says the U.S. Coast Guard rescued both crew members. American champion Sha'Carri Richardson cannot run in the Olympic 100-meter race after testing positive for a chemical found in marijuana. She soundly won the 100 at the Olympic trials. She spoke about her ban on the Today Show and says she smoked marijuana as a way of coping with her mother's recent death.
Don't judge me because I am human. I'm you. I just happen to run a little faster.
Richardson accepted a 30-day suspension. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. Carol Massar here in our Interactive Brokers studio. Joining me once again, Tim Stanovic is out, so joining me is Charlie Pellet to talk about one of the stories catching our attention, and this one is about Silicon Valley and its workers dragging heels on getting back to the office.
Exactly, and this story actually kind of makes sense because Silicon Valley, people are very wired into technology. They have worked from home even before WFH became one of the words that we use every day. So people are used to firing up the laptop, doing everything over the internet, making Zoom calls, and probably no surprise that once they've had a taste of 100% freedom, perhaps far away from Silicon Valley, they're in no rush to come back to office.
Exactly. That's exactly what's going on. Many tech industry offices are sitting nearly empty. According to our Priya Anand of Bloomberg News, only 19% of office workers, Charlie, in the San Francisco metro area had returned as of June 23rd. That's the lowest share of 10 major U.S. metro areas, tracked by building security provider Castle Systems. The region's tech giants, among the first, we know this, as you said, to send their office workers home when the coronavirus pandemic deepened last year, maybe among the last to come on, guys, come on back.
Exactly. On the other hand, their response to that is, why bother? They got a good thing going here. They're collecting their paychecks. And, why deal with traffic in the Bay Area and all of the hassles getting into the offices in San Francisco if that's where they're working? Just parenthetically here, Castle Systems, fascinating business because what they do is every time you swipe one of their cards in and out of the office, they're keeping track of how many people in, how many people out. And while the Bay Area continues to lag the nation, number one in the nation for getting people back to work is the Austin, Texas metro area.
Well, and you know what's interesting? The reporter writes for doing this story saying, just noting many executives are out of town or spending significant stretches of time in Los Angeles. Contacted for this story, they had a common request. Could we do this interview over Zoom?
I laughed when I saw that part, yep.
Right? It's like, yeah, okay, I'll talk to you, but, I'm somewhere else.
Yeah, not leaving the beach in Santa Monica. Let's do it over Zoom. Makes sense.
Do you blame them? Charlie Pellet, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Radio.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks are rallying on speculation the economy is recovering at a pace that will not make the Fed take away the liquidity punch bowl. 10-year yield 1.42%, 10-year up 10.30 seconds now. Gold up 0.8%, 17.90 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.1%, 75.30 barrel. Bottom line here, fireworks ahead of the 4th of July on Wall Street with the S&P up 27 now, up 0.6%. I'm Charlie Cunningham. The Bloomberg Business Flash.
All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Well, this week, Facebook became a member of the $1 trillion market cap club. And as our Sarah Fryer reports, the company getting there with a grow-at-any-cost culture. This story online at BloombergBusinessWeek.com. Sarah is Bloomberg News Big Tech team leader, author of No Filter, The Inside Story of Instagram, which is a perfect summer read if you haven't read it yet. Sarah joins us on the phone in San Francisco. Hey, Sarah, it has been a big week for Facebook. Every time we see a company hit $1 trillion mark, and it tends to be one of these big FANG companies, we all kind of sit up and take notice. You write about how Facebook got there.
You know, thanks for that. It is really remarkable. Facebook, among the tech companies that have achieved that 1 trillion milestone, is the fastest to do so in just 17 years. And if you think about all of the criticism of Facebook's data mining business model, of the way that they've allowed misinformation to go viral, of all of the copying and acquiring competitors' strategy, everything they've been criticized for, forget it. It's been a moment of validation for Zuckerberg, and he has no incentive to operate any other way. And really what's gotten him to this point is, like you said, the grow-at-all-cost culture, the fact that Facebook is just ruthlessly focused on capturing more of our attention and more of our time and doing whatever it can to get another slice of engagement and content on their platforms.
Isn't it kind of amazing? Wait, a company that's built on, creating friends, social friends and likes, and you have this line in your story. I love it. Zuckerberg runs his company like an emperor, paranoid about obsolescence. What do you mean?
He's all about gaining more territory. Every time Facebook announces a new kind of product, every time they acquire something, every time they try a new app, it's all to try to build your habit to increase your reliance on the company. The way we use Facebook today may be very different than how we've used it in the past. Maybe we don't even use Facebook anymore, but we use WhatsApp or we use Instagram. It has tried to give people as many ways and reasons to come on and create content there that then can be processed through their advertising algorithm, so they can give you targeted advertising. It's just the more time you spend there, the more information you create for Facebook to target you with ads, and that's the whole business.
Well, and you've talked to employees on the inside, Sarah, and what do they say, especially when they maybe put out proposals about, fact checking, maybe we should do that some more, or shutting down, I think you write about networks of bots supporting despot politicians. Do those employees kind of get shot down in their ideas?
Yeah, at Facebook, there really is not, it's not a place where if you point out a problem, people are excited. If you point out a problem at Facebook, it's like, why did you say that? We don't have time. We're focused on growing. Like the bonuses at Facebook, the promotions at Facebook are all tied to that incremental addition of users or time spent or engagement on the platform. And if somebody comes in with, maybe a really good idea to increase the well-being of Facebook's users, that is not as exciting if it has any component that would decrease either revenue or growth of users on the platform. And so it's been really frustrating, but if you're Facebook, why change? Right? If you have that trillion validation now, you have people telling you, the market telling you rather, that you're doing everything right.
I do wonder, I spend so much time talking with CEOs of publicly held companies about ESG, environmental social governance. And I do wonder at some point, where does this fit into those metrics? Things like, especially social media, the social media space, and accuracy of information, or trolling people, or data privacy. When does that catch up with the institutional investors who say, wait, you need to be worried about this?
I don't think those investors are in Facebook. In fact, we've seen a lot of those investors pull out of Facebook, but it is something that, listen, I think if Facebook had more clear direction for where it should take its platform, this is the challenge with what regulators have proposed. We saw the thing that got them to their $1 trillion valuation was the judge striking down the Federal Trade Commission lawsuit that called Facebook a monopoly. And the FTC was thinking, one thing that would really bring Facebook down to size is breaking off Instagram and WhatsApp. Well, that's not going to change the culture.
Right.
You're just going to have 3 separate companies that now want to get to $1 trillion in value. So you really just have to make the goalpost different. I say in the piece that this 1 trillion milestone is kind of like having 100 million followers on Instagram or the most viral post on Facebook. It's quality and quantity are not the same thing. Just because something's bigger doesn't mean that it's happier or better or healthier. And I think that there should be other ways to measure success.
So is it possible, though, you bring up the regulators and the FTC, the new FTC chair in particular, she does think about monopolistic power differently. And I do wonder if that will ultimately could lead to some changes at some point in Facebook's model.
Yeah, so the way that monopolies were generally thought of is, this is a company that has had a corner of the market where they're able to overcharge consumers and do all sorts of predatory deals that cut everyone else out. These tech companies, though, all of them, for the most part, are giving away products for free or low margin. They are instead creating their influence on our economy and our world through expanding into new business lines and just trying to gobble up more of our attention and data. And so coming into the FTC role with that kind of mindset, that's along the lines of what Lena Khan has written in the past. Maybe that's a path to thinking about monopoly differently. And with Facebook, it's not so much about what is their market share of social media, because there's so many things to so many people now.
Right.
I think it's more interesting to look at the kinds of people who are dependent on Facebook, the small businesses, the creators, the media organizations, the folks who rely on Facebook either for audience development or for advertising or for a venue to reach their customers. And they're not being well taken care of because Facebook has no incentive to do so.
Right.
There's no customer service. There's no recourse if your account gets shut down. The AI manages everything, and so I think that's a ripe territory to look into.
Yeah, it is pretty impressive the Facebook, the amount of power it has over small businesses and others, and just who it prioritizes when it comes to its platforms. Sarah, thank you so much. Sarah Fryer, she's Big Tech Team leader at Bloomberg News, author of No Filter, The Inside Story of Instagram, joining us on the phone from San Francisco. For those of you listening in New York, D.C., and San Francisco, watching on YouTube, Bloomberg Business Week, we're going to continue. If you're listening on Bloomberg 1061 in Boston, Bay State Business is next. As we mentioned, her story online. Be sure to check out the special heist issue, double issue of Bloomberg Business Week this week.
events, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
World headquarters. I'm Charlie Pellet. We move into the final hour of trading on this Friday, July 2nd, ahead of a long holiday weekend. Stocks are advancing. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ at or near records right now. We've got the S&P up 27 at 43.47, higher by 0.6% on this Jobs Friday. S&P, by the way, up for a 7th straight session, longest winning streak since August after data showed U.S. job growth surged the most in 10 months, while the unemployment rate edged up to 5.9%. The Dow up 139, now up 0.4. NASDAQ up 94, up 0.6. 10-year yield 1.42%. NASDAQ 100 index up 0.9%, but the Russell 2000 index of small cap shares down 0.7%. Today's jobs report bolstered views that the central bank will not rush to taper its stimulus program anytime soon. What about the Fed and the inflation backdrop? Jeffrey Rosenberg is senior portfolio manager at BlackRock Financial.
We've missed on inflation for so long that the Fed is really focused on achieving its inflation target, and they're not going to jump the gun when it comes to full employment. They're going to let the labor market run hot, and today is another piece of evidence that that's working, that strategy's working, the labor market is improving, and that's what they want to see.
Jeff Rosenberg of BlackRock. Lordstown Motor shares plunging after the Wall Street Journal reported that the troubled electric vehicle startup is being investigated by the Justice Department. Ticker RIDE. Lordstown down now by 11.8%. Tesla delivered 201,250 cars worldwide in the second quarter, a record for the electric car maker led by Elon Musk. Tesla shares up now by 0.1%. Recapping, S&P at a record up 0.6%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Bloomberg Quick Takes Tim Stenovic on Bloomberg Radio.
You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Masser, my co-host Tim Stenovic, is off. He'll be back on Tuesday. COVID headlines on this Friday. From France to the U.S., governments really raising the alarm on the spread of the more transmissible Delta variant. COVID-19 cases in France could jump again as soon as the summer, spoiling holidays. India reported more than 400,000 COVID-related deaths, a toll that exceeded only by the U.S. and Brazil. And then J&J coming out saying its single-shot coronavirus vaccine neutralizing the Delta variant and providing durable protection against infection more broadly. So much still going on as we know it. Let's get to our weekly check on COVID and the vaccine. Dr. Ian Lustbader Black with us, clinical professor of medicine at NYU Langone, back on the phone in New York City. Dr. Lustbader, nice to have you here. How are you?
Doing very well, Carol. Always a pleasure. How are you?
I'm okay. I have to be honest. I'm having more and more conversations with colleagues, people in general, with guests on air about this Delta variant and trying to put it in perspective. Most seem to say if you've got the vaccine, you're going to be okay. But I'm trying to kind of assess what it might mean maybe over the next couple of months when it gets colder. Could we see another wave? How do you see it?
So we talked a few weeks ago about Delta emerging in India and that it was more transmissible. Fortunately, it does not appear to be more lethal at this point, but India, certainly with only 10% of the population vaccinated, is in trouble, and not surprising that they're having a significant number of cases. Same for the UK. In the United States, we are seeing more cases, a rise of about 14%. Really primarily in states with a low vaccination rate. So this is another argument why vaccinations are very important and protective, and we can talk a little bit more about the specifics of that, but we're seeing cases in Nevada, Wyoming, Missouri, Arkansas, and unfortunately, we're seeing a rise in the number of new Delta variants. Eventually, that is going to supplant the original alpha variant that we have here. Delta's about 20% or so of new cases. I think that's going to rise. It is going to become the more dominant kind of subspecies that will occur in patients who are not vaccinated.
Could it lead to a situation akin to where we were a year and a half ago or so on the initial virus before all the variants started breaking out, where we start to see hospitals overwhelmed, especially because not everybody has been vaccinated, and maybe we see pockets around the country where that's happening? Is that likely?
Well, we're definitely going to see pockets. I think it's sort of good news, bad news. The good news is that really 99%, over 99% of deaths in the hospital are from unvaccinated patients. Mm-hmm. So the vaccines really, that's more evidence that vaccines really do provide some significant level of protection, and it should be a warning to people who are not vaccinated. And we definitely see people who have vaccine hesitancy for a variety of reasons, some internet rumors and some other underlying medical issues. But for the vast majority of people, any of the vaccines are very effective. We've had some new data about J&J, and we certainly see that the Pfizer mRNA vaccine is clearly 80 to 90% effective in protection. There are a few cases of these breakthroughs where people do get recovery of virus after they've been vaccinated. Usually they're very mild or even asymptomatic cases. The data is about 10,000 patients in the U.S. as of April 30th. It's probably a little higher now. But basically, certainly the mRNA vaccines are very, very effective. And really so are the AstraZeneca and J&J as well. Not quite to that level, but quite effective.
So younger people, though, that's where we start to see, or we have been seeing, maybe, hesitancy when it comes to taking the vaccine, or maybe they're just not thinking about it as much because they weren't as worried as much. But should they be worried, especially when we know that there are those COVID long haulers, that you can get COVID and you can be dealing with ailments for a long time?
Carol, as usual, you're right on the story. This is really a case of, some risk a small risk if you take the vaccine, but a significant risk if you choose not to and get COVID, because it does turn out at least a third of patients who get COVID, maybe even more, have much long-term issues, whether it's loss of smell or brain fog or chest pain or shortness of breath or fatigue. We really see, a panoply of long-haul symptoms in, unfortunately, a significant percent of patients. And we really don't have a great way of treating that. We have clinics that we're starting now, long-haul clinics, but there's no secret formula to helping these patients who have ongoing symptoms.
So here we are, almost a year and a half in, I feel like. What goes through your head when you just kind of look back at this time?
Certainly in the Northeast, we've been through a rough go with a lot of hospitalizations. We now have, over, at least in the Northeast, New York, 70% vaccinations. We're seeing very few cases in hospitalizations. I have a number of patients who ask me about breakthrough, and they ask me about potential risks of the vaccine and that it hasn't been around long. But I think we can say now the problems with vaccines are really very low, not zero. Some of the problems with clotting and so forth may be related to the way the vaccines are administered, meaning you have to aspirate a little bit back. You don't want to inject in a blood vessel. But there's some data. People were worried about fertility. There was one study out of the University of Miami that actually showed sperm counts went up a bit after the vaccination, not down. So, that's not a reason to take it, but I think that's at least one element to reassure people that what they're fearing may be more internet rumor than real fact.
Right, and it's a reminder of making sure you really do know the facts about what's going on. It's interesting what you talked about, fertility and pregnancy. We talked with Dr. Ruth Karen over at Johns Hopkins yesterday about the importance of vaccinations in pregnant women and tracking that. Ian, sit tight for a second. We're going to come back, continue our conversation. I actually want to ask you too a little bit of an off-COVID topic about Regeneron that came up with some research when it comes to the genetic basis of obesity. So maybe we'll dig a little bit into that in just a moment. First up, though, back to World and National News and Nancy Lyons. She's in our 99.1 newsroom in the nation's capital. Hi, Nance.
Hey, Carol. President Biden is describing the addition of 850,000 jobs last month as a history-making economic turnaround, thanks to the pace of vaccinations and the impact of his economic agenda. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman has more from Washington.
The president said the disbursement of child support payments that begin this month will give the economy a further boost.
Instead of workers competing with each other for jobs that are scarce, employers are competing with each other to attract workers. More jobs, better wages. It also gives them the power to demand to be treated with dignity and respect in the workplace.
The president said he's not concerned that people's refusal to vaccinate would create another major outbreak, but they could spread the variant to other unvaccinated people, causing preventable deaths. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
The death toll in the Surfside, Florida condo collapse is now up to 20, with 128 remaining unaccounted for. That's according to Miami-Dade County Mayor Daniela Levine Cava.
Last night, we did discover 2 additional victims. Tragically, one of those victims was the 7-year-old daughter of a City of Miami firefighter.
Cava says last night was especially difficult for the rescue teams. The Boy Scouts of America organization has reached an $850 million agreement with attorneys representing some 60,000 victims of child sex abuse. It marks one of the largest sums in U.S. history involving cases of sex abuse. Attorneys for the BSA filed court papers outlining a restructured support agreement with attorneys representing the victims. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
Thank you so much, Nancy Lyons there in D.C. Joining me once again right here in New York, Charlie Pellet of Bloomberg News. I'm Carol Masser in our Interactive Broker studio. Charlie, it turns out cars are having a moment.
How did this happen? I thought that young people were deciding not to get cars. All of a sudden,
Cars so yesterday.
Exactly. All of a sudden, I'm reading about, we've got used car prices going through the roof, and we've got young people, it turns out, millennials, Gen Zers, they're actually turning around and buying cars now.
I know. I have a daughter who's 18 and getting her driver's test got messed up because of COVID, and she is on a waiting list to try and get it done because waiting times for driving tests have blown out. It's just nuts. Basically, go back a few years ago and obituaries were being written for the motor car. Millennials and Gen Zers, though, or at least the argument at the time, were going to just move away from car ownership. More of them were in cities. They were embracing public transportation and ride-hailing services like Uber and Lyft. And then the pandemic happened and everything changed.
Yeah, put my son into that category, sort of. He's an 18-year-old. He could care less about cars. He's got a skateboard. He's got the metro down in D.C. He's got the subway system here in New York. He's got his e-bike.
Wait till he's in the suburbs. He's going to want that driver's license.
That too. We're a city family. But yes, you're absolutely right. You do have to have it. Or there's option B, Uber and Lyft, and you look what's going on there.
Well, and I've seen this happen, and I talk to the Uber and Lyft drivers all the time, and I've seen it sometimes asking for a car. It gets really expensive because there's not a lot of drivers out there, and there is a shortage of drivers in the U.S., and that is propelling prices for Uber and Lyft rides to record highs and pushing the services to rethink how they attract gig workers. So Uber and Lyft, they're pouring millions of dollars into incentives for drivers to return a short-term fix that has kind of helped alleviate the scarcity and tempered some of the fare increases. But the labor crunch is on. We've talked about it for all different types of industries, and we're seeing it for Uber and Lyft drivers.
Exactly, and you got to encourage these people to come back and start driving again, and then all of a sudden, that's perhaps when we'll start seeing fares going up, but they sweeten job perks and higher fares. That's what it'll take.
Millennials, they may even like station wagons. Go figure, Charlie.
There you go.
This is Bloomberg.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
World headquarters, I'm Charlie Howard. We've got 43 minutes to go until the closing bell and a long holiday weekend for a lot of people. U.S. stocks, they're trading at records. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ 100 index at or near records right now. Let's get the very latest as we head over to the First Word breaking news desk for today's afternoon call. Here he is, Bailey Lipschultz.
And good afternoon, Charlie. As you said, stocks are trading higher, and in fact, right now are near their session highs after U.S. job growth surged the most in 10 months. The Dow is up 165 points. S&P is higher by 30, while the NASDAQ is up 105 points. The U.S. 10-year yield is at 1.42%, and small caps are lower by 10 points. 9 of the 11 main S&P sectors are trading higher, led by gains in tech and consumer discretionary, while financials are the worst performers. Nasdaq Biotechs fell 20 points, transports dipped 40, semis rose 15 points, while the VIX is lower by 2.8%. Leaders in the Dow, Microsoft, Apple, and J&J, while IBM, Walgreens, and Boeing are the worst performers. IBM fell the most in 5 months after its president, Jim Whitehurst, stepped down. Lordstown Motors tumbled after a report the startup is being probed by the Justice Department. And DD Global sank after China said it's starting a cybersecurity probe. Wrapping things up, Disney raced gains after the information said Disney Plus subscriber growth has slowed sharply over recent months. Live from the First Word breaking news desk, I'm Bailey Lipschultz. Charlie?
We thank you very much, Bailey. Have a great 4th of July weekend, and to hear live breaking news over your Bloomberg-type squawk, SQUAWK on your terminal. I'm Charlie Pellet, my friends, at the Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you so much, Charlie. I want to get right back to Dr. Ian Lustbader, clinical professor of medicine at NYU Langone, still on the phone in New York City. Ian, I hope you don't mind if you will indulge me and talk about something else in the medical community. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later on our broadcast, but Regeneron, it's a stock that's moving today, but they discovered a rare genetic mutation that protects against obesity, so providing some new insights into the genetic basis of obesity. You know, you and I talk about a lot of different subjects when it comes to the medical community, and this is one that, you know, could be huge for a company like that in trying to get to the bottom of why is it that some people have a tougher time when it comes to weight.
Right. So obesity really is an epidemic over the past several decades. It's estimated that up to 40% or maybe more of Americans are obese. And part of that is defined as BMI or body mass index. I'm not going to get into the details of that, but suffice it to say, you know, you go down any street and it varies from northern states, southern states, but obesity is endemic. Part of that is really an understanding that for most of human civilization, food was very scarce. We really evolved to put on weight and hang on to weight because those are the people that survived the Ice Age and famine and a whole host of things. It's not really until kind of the 20th century with food preservation and crops and fertilizers, really after the 1950s, after World War II, when technological breakthroughs occurred, both in farming and food preservation, that food became abundant. I mean, we think food's been abundant for a long time, but it's really only been in the last, say, 50 years, which is also when we've seen obesity and all the complications of that, diabetes and so forth. So we really do need to better understand what are the genetics behind that and really how to modify it. We don't have great treatments. Obviously, we talk about diet. There's also some evidence that maybe antibiotics in food and in meat, for example, may affect the microbiome, the gut bacteria, and that may be another factor, but certainly genetics play a role. And the more we understand about obesity, the better we're able to treat it, because now we've gone from famine to feast, and we need to really get back to lean and mean. That is now the evolutionary advantage, whereas in the past, being a little overweight helped you survive. It's different now.
It is so different. And it's interesting, you were talking about this, about food preservation, how it's really changed it, that food used to be so scarce. And so I find it interesting today in the 21st century, we have so much obesity in this world, but at the same time, there are still millions of people who don't have enough food. It's like these incredible contrasts. How do we fix this and kind of find a nice balance? Because we know obesity in particular, same as food starvation, but obesity has obviously a cost to society. Is it the food companies? Is it governments? How do we, because I think we got to a place where big portions, it's a good thing. We just have a different mindset about food.
I think we definitely do have a different mindset about food, and I think we do need to kind of peel the layers back and look into vested interests. For example, just briefly to get back to COVID, there are potential medications like ivermectin perhaps or other simple available medications that may be effective. I think we need more studies. We're using very effective monoclonal antibodies, which are rather expensive, and I think we need to put more research into this, and I think we need to put more research, as we do, into obesity, for example. It may not be good to be giving antibiotics to chickens and to cows and to so forth. That may play a more important role that we're just beginning to understand at this point, exposing young kids at an early age to antibiotic after antibiotic. And I think we need to distribute food better, and I think we need to, there's a lot of evidence that plant-based diets are better for the environment, lower CO2, lower methane. I think there certainly is a role for people who may want to eat meat, but I think the data is very clear that healthier people are having more plant-based diet and complex grains, for example, oatmeal, water-soluble fiber, less diverticular disease. So I think we need to educate people, we need to get more research, and we need to distribute food better to places that need it. We throw out a tremendous amount of food in the United States just because it doesn't look good, just because you've got misshapen fruit.
I just did a panel on that. It's like 30-40% of food in general gets wasted in the whole supply chain. Hey, got about 20-25 seconds left. A year after the year that's been so crazy, this July 4th different for you?
Yes, certainly I think we're beginning to see a light at the end of the tunnel. I think last July 4th when we spoke, we thought this would be over. It's not over. We're going to have another year or two, just like in 1918. But have a great Independence Day weekend. Congratulations on Connecticut. And we are making progress, and I think everyone needs to hang in there. We will conquer this.
All right. Good optimism and a great way to go into the holiday weekend. Be well. Dr. Ian Lustbader, a clinical professor of medicine at NYU Langone, on the phone in New York City. Coming up, we're going to check in with the chart of the day, Dave Wilson, and the song of the day right here on Bloomberg.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
This is Bloomberg Business Week. It's the Friday before the long July 4th holiday weekend. Before we get going, though, we got to get to the chart of the day. Dave Wilson stopping by in just a moment. We're also going to preview the Bloomberg collaboration once again with the Boston Pops for the July 4th holiday. We'll get to that in just a moment. First up, though, Charlie Bell. Let's get a check on that trading day. We're just grinding higher and higher and higher here.
Indeed, best level of the day right now. Right to the numbers. We'll give you the Y in a moment here with the S&P up 31 now, up 0.7%, bringing that YTD gain to 15.8%. The Dow up 159 now, best level of the day, close to it, up 0.5%. Nasdaq up 112, up by about 0.8%. 10-year yield up 1.42%. Nasdaq keeps on going, up 1.1%. Russell 2000 on the minus side, down by 0.8%. Gold pushing higher by 0.7%, 17.89 the ounce. I'm Charlie Pellet. That Carol Massar is your Bloomberg Business Flash.
It is indeed. All right, Charlie, thank you so much. Well, for the 5th year in a row, Bloomberg is hosting the Boston Pops July 4th. Spectacular, great musical guests once again, great spirit, and the incredible tradition of the beloved Boston Pops. All of it being broadcast on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg TV on Sunday. Bloomberg News reporter Janet Wu is there for the celebration in Tanglewood. Janet, how are you?
How are you? I will tell you, it is raining here, just as it has been in the city, but that's just Mother Nature clearing everything out so we can have clear weather on Sunday.
Exactly.
And right now, we are in the shed, and there's a lot of work going on here, Carol, because as you know, we usually do this at the Hat Shell, and they had to put everything out here, all the lights and all the chairs and the musical stands and all of the different decorations. So they are busily assembling everything so it's ready for the big concert on Sunday.
Well, listen, last year they had to do it differently, too, because of the pandemic, but they did do it in a different way. And this way it's a little bit different because you are in Tanglewood, but nonetheless, there's going to be great musicians, great artists, and, of course, the Boston Pops.
Yeah, they've been so thoughtful about this, Carol. Obviously, last year we had to do something pre-taped. We could not do anything live, so we sort of curated some of the great performances from last year. What is so amazing to think is that this year, this is going to be the first time the Pops musicians and many other performances on this stage have performed live in front of an audience in over a year and a half. It's really astounding, and that's why there's so much energy right here and so much anticipation and excitement. It's not that we take this concert for granted, but we just did not ever dream that we would go through such a long period without live music. And that's why everyone is so excited about it this year. And you mentioned the people that we're going to have. We all had to pull this together very quickly because normally this preparation for this concert happens year round. It's been condensed to about 3 weeks. But we're so pleased that John Batiste, the music director of The Late Show, is going to be the headliner. He had a big year, Carol, because while all of us were in shutdown, he was still beaming out to the world via television, although even he did not have a live audience. And then what did he do during the pandemic? He went and won an Oscar for a musical score he wrote for an animated movie. So very exciting. And he's going to be collaborating with Mavis Staples, who's really a legend in jazz and blues music. So I love that partnership, don't you? Because it's 2 generations of musicians that are coming together and finding a great way to collaborate. I'm so excited.
It's what they're about, right? The Boston Pops, they think about the audience. It's young, it's old, it's everyone with different tastes of music, and they're really wonderful about bringing all of that up on the stage, whether it's in Boston at the Hat Shell or whether it's in Tanglewood.
Yeah, and what's interesting this year is, I know that I'm speaking to you in New York City right now. Well, this very magical spot is really exactly halfway between Boston and New York as far as driving goes. And it's just this idyllic spot in the beautiful hills of the Berkshires. And right now we're just starting to see a view break through the mist and the clouds. And it's magical. It's also open air. The shed doesn't have walls, so we will have several thousand people here, mostly first responders. And then we're going to have people sitting socially distanced on the lawn, and they can once again do their picnic culture. I don't know if you've experienced this, but they can bring their candelabras and their tablecloths. And
they know how to do it. It's not that normal picnic, man. They really know how to do it.
Yeah, it's next level. I would say it's an 11 how they do the picnic culture here, Carol.
Exactly. Can we count on, though, some of the traditions from the Boston Pops just quickly?
Absolutely, because the concert would not be the concert without that. So, of course, there's going to be 1812 Overture, and the cannons are coming here. We would not do that without cannons. And also, we look forward to that sing-along. And how long has it been since we've sung together in big groups? And we look forward to that medley where they sing the special songs for each branch of the armed services, and people get to stand up. And then, of course, we love to finish it all off with the wonderful sort of patriotic favorites that we've had since childhood. You know, Yankee Doodle Dandy, and, of course, we'll all sort of hum and sing along to America, This Land Is Your Land, and My Land, and Stars and Stripes Forever. So we are just excited to once again do all those traditions.
All right. Janet, thank you so much. Janet Wu there in Tanglewood, and catch Bloomberg's coverage of the Boston Pops July 4th Spectacular this Sunday, July 4th, 8 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg TV. This is Bloomberg.
Come, let's mix where Rockefellers walk with sticks or umbrellas in the mix. Putting on the Ritz.
Aristocratic Dividends. Perfect song to do this.
Absolutely. Putting on a Ritz by Taco. Why not? One-hit wonder.
I mean, he was a one-hit wonder, wasn't he?
Absolutely. Sounds kind of sophisticated, though. Kind of gets you where you need to go. But when you talk about dividend aristocrats, you have to keep in mind it's not a matter of nobility or anything like that. It's a matter of consistency when it comes to increasing payouts. You know, S&P has this S&P 500 Dividend Aristocrats Index, and companies in there have raised their dividends for at least 25 years running. And I bring this up because it's something that Andrew Garthwaite, a global strategist at Credit Suisse, had in his latest note, basically looking at not only the U.S. but also Europe and saying, you want to own the aristocrats about now. They're looking good. So what the chart does is it compares that group of aristocrats with the broader S&P 500 based on valuation, specifically forward price earnings ratios, where you look out 12 months, see what the earnings are going to be, and then see how expensive or cheap the indexes are. And as it turns out, you know, in the last couple of months, we've kind of seen a reversal in that relationship, you know, which to some extent you could argue has gone along with a sort of a broader move, you know, back toward growth and away from value stocks, for example. So, you know, as much as 5.5%, that's how much the ratio has dropped from mid-May through yesterday. So, in his view, these aristocrats are, quote, abnormally cheap. If you want to know more, folks, send me an email. I'll get you the chart, the explanation that goes with it, and everything I do going forward. The email address is dwilson@bloomberg.net. That's dwilson@bloomberg.net.
Dave Wilson always putting on the Ritz when it comes to his chart of the day. And your stock of the day.
Shenandoah Telecommunications.
Oh, my gosh.
Bit of a mouthful. Ticker's much shorter, SHEN. It's a phone company. They declared a special dividend of $18.75 a share that's payable next month. What we're talking about is part of the proceeds from selling their wireless business to T-Mobile US for close to $2 billion. The deal was completed yesterday, and so shareholders are getting some of the proceeds. Shenandoah also paid off some debt, $684 million worth. But, you know, put it all together, you've got a stock that is up the most since November 2019. At the moment, higher by close to 16%.
And it explains the more than 31% increase that we're seeing in the stock so far this year. Dave Wilson, thank you so much. Have a great holiday weekend. Dave Wilson, his stock of the day at 4:15 p.m. Wall Street time on Facebook, LinkedIn, and on Twitter at The One Dave. Right now, over to D.C. and Nancy Lyons for World and National News. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. The pace of U.S. hiring really sped up in June, with payrolls increasing by the most in 10 months, suggesting that firms are having greater success recruiting workers to keep pace with the economy's reopening. President Biden is convinced his American Rescue Plan and antivirus measures are helping drive the recovery.
This much is already clear. We're on track, and we're on the right track. Our plan is working, and we're not going to let up now.
Biden says it's especially good to see employers competing with each other to attract workers, because he says that will help improve paychecks. Democrats are eyeing a July budget resolution, which would be a key step in setting up legislation to enact President Biden's plan for trillions of dollars in social spending and tax hikes. Congressman Don Beyer of Virginia, a Democrat, spoke with Bloomberg's David Weston earlier today.
We've already been warned. If we don't get it by July 30th, we could be here the first or second week of August to get it done. I am convinced, though, that our speaker doesn't want this to languish through the August recess.
Beyer says House Budget Chairman John Yarmuth is deferring to Senate Budget Committee Chairman Bernie Sanders on taking the first step on the budget resolution. Elsa has strengthened into the first hurricane of the Atlantic season as it's blowing off roofs and snapping trees in the eastern Caribbean, where officials have closed schools and businesses and even airports under the threat of flash flooding and landslides. Elsa is on track to strike Florida by Tuesday. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Master, and joining me once again is Charlie Pellet. And I feel like we shared a couple of stories, Charlie, that are, I feel like, two ends of our spectrum right now about what's going on in New York City when it comes to apartment buyers and then what's going on out in the Hamptons.
Indeed. Party time out in the Hamptons. It's funny because there's one, I'm just going to jump quickly to that one there. I like parties. What can I tell you? But,
Me too. I love parties.
But, you know, there's a quote from one guy in the story there who talked about he went out 5 nights a week in a row last week. This Joey Wolfer of the Sagaponic Winery family, he's got a clothing store in Sag Harbor, and what an outfit he's wearing. But it's unbelievable. I mean, the guy's saying he hasn't been to a party in a year and a half.
Yes, there's also a picture of Jason Flom and his 59 Corvette. Jason's been on our air talking about all the work that he does for people who have been wrongly convicted and in prison. But it's a story by Amanda Gordon. She says the Hampton parties are back with grand hosts and money to burn. And she talks about Jason Flom particularly. She says talk of politics and taxes abound as the summer heats up. So that's the conversation she's overhearing and talking to people about.
Indeed. Good times in the Hamptons. And let me tell you, good times in Manhattan and New York City when it comes to buying apartments. Obviously, you saw the story on the Bloomberg.
Good for the sellers and the agents.
It is unbelievable. I mean, transactions surging, 150% from a year early? 150%. That is a huge jump.
Exactly. Biggest annual increase in data going back to 1990, according to a report out by Miller Samuel and brokerage Douglas Elliman Real Estate. They often put out these updates on what's going on in New York City. Also record the proportion of deals completed below the seller's asking price at 92%. That was the biggest share since the firm started tracking the metric back in 2008.
Yeah, and I can just hear people sitting in traffic right now listening to us, and you know, when Pellet says, jumping 150%, they're saying, thank you, Captain Obvious. But where we were, real estate in a coma, and that's the headline on the story here, New York City apartment buyers emerging from a coma to drive those record sales.
They're talking about bargains. I'm going to let everybody look at the story on Bloomberg.com because whenever we talk New York City prices, they're like, that's a bargain. All right, Charlie, thanks. This is Bloomberg.
updates, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Risk on ahead of a long holiday weekend. We have got the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ trading at records right now. Stocks up on speculation. The economy is recovering at a pace that will not make the Federal Reserve take away the liquidity punch bowl that has helped push the market to a record. S&P 500 index up for a 7th straight session, the longest winning streak since August after data this morning showed job growth surged the most in 10 months. The S&P best level of the day right now, up 32 points, up just about 0.8%. We've got the Dow up 167, up by 0.5%. NASDAQ up 116, up 0.8. S&P up for the year by 15.8%. 10-year up 10/30 seconds, 10-year yield 1.42%. Gold up 0.7%. 17.88 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude oil up 0.1%. 75.32 a barrel. Cannot ignore the Russell 2000 on the downside today, tumbling 0.9%. We've got NASDAQ also, NASDAQ at a record. NASDAQ 100 index also at a record, up 1.1%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is the Bloomberg Business Flash.
I'm driving in my car. I turn on the radio.
How about you let me drive?
Oh, no.
Who's gonna drive you home?
Honey, please, I'll do the driving.
Drive on.
Excuse me, I want to drive.
Just drive, baby.
It's the question that drives us.
This is the Drive to the Close.
That funky music will drive us till the dawn.
On Bloomberg Radio.
So just about 10.5 minutes left in today's trading session. It was a big day. We got that monthly jobs report. We've seen stocks just take off, and we're looking at record highs for those major equity averages. Meantime, the bond market, certainly those yields along the yield curve, looks like they have definitely settled down. So taking these numbers, that jobs report, a little bit better than forecast, and showing continued recovery in the U.S. economy. Nonetheless, the bond market taking it in stride. So let's get to it with Eric Stein. He watches the fixed income market. He's Chief Investment Officer of Fixed Income over at Eaton Vance. Eaton Vance, by the way, is the presenting sponsor of the Boston Pops July 4th Spectacular, which, as we just talked about, you can catch that on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg TV on Sunday. Eric joining us now from Boston. Eric, first I've got to ask you, I mean, Boston Pops, man, you live in Boston, you know about it, you go to it, it's just incredible.
Yeah, no, it's a great event that, at Eaton Vance we're super excited to sponsor for the 5th year in a row in conjunction with Bloomberg. Obviously, this year being a kind of hybrid event, both in Tanglewood for the concert and then the fireworks over the Boston Common. So a little different than in pre-COVID times, but at least back to something live, unlike last summer. And so certainly a very exciting event that I'm looking forward to, and I know hopefully many of your listeners are as well.
Yeah, we always look forward to it. Hybrid, like the rest of the world, right, as we make our way back. Having said that, I feel like this was a bit of a hybrid jobs report. There was something in it almost for everyone, and it wasn't too hot for everybody to all of a sudden think the Fed's going to have to change its thinking about the balance sheet or quantitative easing or rates anytime soon. But it did also remind us that things are continuing to recover.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. A hybrid report or a Goldilocks report, I think you can call it either one.
Can we say that? Can we say it's a Goldilocks report?
For the equity market, I think you can certainly say that. Looking at the markets, and I think the markets have been a little, despite the fact equities seem to go up almost every day. I think broad markets have been a little confused, given in the past 2.5 weeks since the last Fed meeting, where the Fed was incrementally hawkish, and so you saw a flattening of the yield curve and strength in the U.S. dollar. Today that reversed with weakness in the dollar, and I think a weak dollar yields a couple basis points lower in treasuries and stocks up. You combine that price action, that shows me that markets are less concerned about the Fed prematurely tightening, less concerned about that, and less concerned about tapering, and then asset markets continue to do well because you have the momentum, cyclical momentum that we're seeing as we come out of COVID, hopefully, variants notwithstanding, come out of COVID. So a lot of cyclical momentum in the economy, and then from an asset price perspective, it's how do you look at that as well as intersection of monetary policy, fiscal policy, and whatnot.
we do, you do, parse over everything that the Fed says, certainly in those meetings, those statements, and then when we start to hear from Fed speakers following those meetings or before the next meeting. You said that, I'm just looking at some research you shared with us, that you think it was pretty significant that in that last Fed meeting, the first time the Fed seemed somewhat concerned about inflation being too high, they are starting to kind of spoon feed us and remind us that, folks, this policy isn't going to be forever.
Yeah, exactly. Look, if you go back almost a year ago to August of 2020 at virtual Jackson Hole, and when Chair Powell kind of put out this average inflation targeting framework that effectively the Fed, if they were undershooting on inflation, they need to overshoot to catch up, and they would not let bygones be bygones, and that, along with a lot of other signals from the Fed, I think was trying to show markets, look, we want higher inflation. We think we've been missing on our inflation target to the downside since the financial crisis. Then we had COVID come. We really want higher inflation, and they have not pushed back against that narrative until the last meeting, where they pushed back against it a little bit and tried to get slightly more symmetrical in their policy, potential policy response going forward. Still very, very easy monetary policy, but do they start to pull the stimulus back?
Is it smart for investors too, Eric, to think about when they look at the financial markets that even when the Fed starts to either stop buying, it's still going to be a stimulative, policy, right? And even if rates start to go up, it's still rates that are very low on a historical basis. It will still be easy money out there.
Yeah, so 100% correct that it will still be easy money, though I will say that markets, get set at the margin versus what their expectations were before they got a piece of data or communication from the Fed. So incrementally, if you go back to the taper tantrum of 2013, and I think that's what both markets and the Fed have that, even though it was 8 years ago, have that, very much entrenched into their memories, is, that was still easy monetary policy, but it was the beginning of tapering, really the beginning of talking about tapering that scared the markets. By the time the Fed actually tapered its bond purchases at that point in the cycle, then markets continued to do well. So certainly, monetary policy, its effect on financial markets is really set at the margin. But you're exactly right. From an absolute or even relative to history perspective, rates are still very, very low. And actually, since the Fed meeting, rates have come down, particularly at the back end, which to me is sending some signals that maybe people think the Fed could be tightening a little too quickly.
What's the risk here? Is it the Delta variant or is it something else?
So look, certainly the Delta variant is a risk. I think in almost everyone's baseline scenario, we continue to have a real recovery, particularly here in the U.S., where there may be pockets of more unvaccinated parts of the country that get hurt by the Delta variant. And you look at what's going on in the UK right now, and the U.S. has been a month or 2 months behind that. So I think that's a risk, although that certainly wouldn't be my baseline. Still health issues, but my baseline is that the economy continues to get stronger from here. But then there's this intersection with what we've been talking about so far: monetary policy and markets, and is the Fed going to continue to always be incrementally more and more easy? The last meeting really pushed back against that.
All right. So how do you play it when it comes to the fixed income market? There's different ways, and whether it's treasuries, whether it's corporates, what's the approach you would recommend to investors at this point?
Yeah. So look, first off, we talk about equity markets rallying. Lots of parts of credit markets in fixed income, which I think one of the specialties we have here at Eaton Vance is have rallied a lot. So the going forward returns are just not what they're going to be for the past year or so. That we've had quite a strong rebound in the credit market since the depths of COVID, the COVID market impact at the end of March of 2020. But I think an asset class like floating rate bank loans, where the coupon floats off short-term interest rates, that sector has been one of the best performing sectors in fixed income year to date. That's been a good place to be. Other parts of the markets, emerging markets have certainly lagged as COVID has hit various EM countries very, very hard. But going forward, we think in the second half of the year, I think the incremental delta in terms of getting more vaccines will be happening in Europe, and will also be happening in emerging markets where it's happened. The U.S. is, at least from a large country perspective, outperformed in that area in the first half of the year.
Do you see any kind of major correction within the fixed income market? And again, I know it's kind of a broad basket, but do you see anything like that coming in the next year or so?
So to me, it's like, right now is that we're in this Goldilocks scenario with low rates but strong growth. And so the credit spread component of fixed income spreads are quite tight because the economy is getting stronger and investors are more confident that companies can pay back their debt. And the interest rate or duration component of fixed income yields are pretty low because the Fed still has easy policy, but also not that easy policy that people get too worried about inflation. So if we tip one way or the other, then you could see a sell-off if we stay in this Goldilocks scenario. The positive for people that own bonds is that likely those prices stay where they are and they earn the carry. The negative for people trying to invest in bonds, the starting point of yields remains quite low.
Never easy. All right, Eric, good stuff. Thank you. Eric Stein, Chief Investment Officer of Fixed Income at Eaton Vance. And again, a reminder that Eaton Vance is a presenting sponsor of the Boston Pops July 4 Spectacular, which you can catch on radio and TV here at Bloomberg on Sunday. All right, it is time for our cross-platform coverage of the closing bell, Beyond the Bell, coming up.
Beyond the Bell, Bloomberg's comprehensive cross-platform coverage of the U.S. market close starts right now.
Just about 2 minutes away from the end of the trading day. Taylor Riggs, Sonali Bassett counting you down to the closing bell with myself, Caroline Hyde, to take you beyond the bell. It's our global simulcast. Of course, it's Carol Massa here with us to bring together Bloomberg television, radio, YouTube audiences worldwide as we get excited, for some celebrations this weekend, some fireworks at the market close. But they're not much fireworks when it comes to volumes, down by basically 20% on the S&P 500, Carol.
Right. Caroline, those who came to play showed up, certainly the bulls on Wall Street. And we're talking about some records in some of the major equity averages. I heard Goldilocks economy so many times today in our broadcast of people saying that jobs report gave us optimism that things are continuing to recover, but it wasn't so hot that all of a sudden that the Fed had to quickly change its policies.
And Sonali, what really stood out to me is this continued rotation that we've heard from all of the guests today, out of value into growth. Sonali, you certainly see that today with bonds really catching a bid, yields lower. How much has that really fueled some of this rotation back into big tech?
Yeah, and meantime, markets are super calm. You're seeing that VIX down to levels below the 15 handle today, and you're seeing that at the lowest level since February of 2020. Let's see if that ends up jumping back later this summer or into later this year.
Just think, it could be 7 records in a row for the S&P 500. NASDAQ 100 up 7 weeks in a row, that longest run since 2019. So I do wonder next week when we get the FOMC minutes, does everybody parse through the words and maybe start to get a little bit more nervous? And then we're going to hit into earnings, and that will be certainly key as we move deeper into July, guys.
I can't believe it's earnings upon us already. We kick off with the banks, of course, but we've got 11 seconds, and financials were out of vogue today, and that, of course, meant that your cyclical trade was not on. Value out of favor. What was on top was big tech. NASDAQ, as we get that closing bell, and the fireworks. Check them out. What's going on at the Macy's? Well done, Macy's, bringing us some little bit of excitement at that closing bell. What a day, what an excitement ahead of the celebration of the birth of the United States. We're looking at S&P 500 currently up 0.75%, 32 points higher. NASDAQ up 116 points, almost 117, 0.8% higher. Big tech, your outperformer. The Dow, your underperformer, up 0.4%, 154 points higher. That, as we saw, financials, energy, of course, it was a beaten up area. Russell 2000 is where we saw the real laggards, though, off by more than a percentage point, Carol.
Yeah, exactly. That, what happened with the small caps, although they've been on quite a run, but just to even watch the trajectory of equities today, as Caroline, you mentioned, it was low volume, and we just saw an uptick in kind of the last hour of trading, although we finished off our highs of the session, as you mentioned, but nonetheless, S&P hitting a record for the 7th straight day. First time we've seen that since 1997, everyone.
Unbelievable, and it really is highlighting that underperformance of the Russell 2000 on a sector level. You really see that loud and clear. Let's look with some of the losers here as you see that rotation out of banks, out of energy. For a radio audience, we're looking at declines on a sector level of 0.2 to 0.7%. And that rotation as the camera migrates northward. I hate to break it to you guys, it's big tech, it's media, it's software, it's tech, hardware, equipment. You're up anywhere from 1% to 1.6%. And so that really shows perhaps that maybe defensiveness, Carol, that we continue to see. I would just highlight, again, for the radio audience, when I always take a look at the losers, and there's only 3 of them, and all the losers are green on the screen, that is telling you something, Caroline, about what's going on.
Yeah, I love that you're bringing up energy as one of the worst performers, and we're getting breaking headlines coming from OPEC Plus. Remember, they didn't manage to get any sort of deal together in terms of where they're going to see production going for the foreseeable. OPEC Plus pausing their oil talks for a second time. They're in deadlock. The UAE, in particular, slowing conversations down there. They're going to retrack, reassert themselves, reconfigure that dialogue on Monday, Carol.
And Caroline, we've seen the energy market trade on those headlines, expectations of, more supply, not supply, and we've certainly seen that play out. Taylor, though, hit it right on the money. Technology was one of the big winners in today's session. I'm just going to bring out a few of them. First up, I've got to talk about Virgin Galactic.
Yes.
Obviously a technology company. It was up 26% at its highs today, finishing up 4%. Who would go to space? Show of hands. Anybody?
Me. Well, the Brits. We're going to beat you.
Hands.
Branson's going to beat Bezos.
He is, man. Those billionaires are competitive. Well, anyway, so you do have Richard Branson saying he's going to go to space before Jeff Bezos, and we definitely saw Virgin. Virgin, by the way, has doubled or almost doubled so far in 2021. The big tech, Taylor touched on it. Microsoft, I just want to point out, it was up about 2.2% in today's session, really powering the Dow in the overall trade. Google, the same thing. Google, by the way, the best performing FANG stock in the first half of the year and continuing to continuing to trade higher. It was up almost 2% in today's trade. And I want to mention Regeneron Pharmaceuticals up 1.6%, discovering a rare genetic mutation that protects against obesity, so providing some new insights into the genetic basis of obesity. There are so many obese adults in this world, so the potential for some kind of treatment or understanding of that has a lot of market potential for that company.
Let's take a look at some of the decliners, of course, on days of record highs. Really interesting to see IBM, of course, at one point having the worst day that we've seen in a while. The president, Jim Whitehurst, stepping down. He, of course, used to run a Red Hat, so that is making investors really nervous. Schwab's also taking a $200 million charge from the SEC around the probe relating to robo-advising. You're seeing Lordstown Motors, you're off now almost 11%. Talking about probes, Caroline, the Justice Department looking into this, and off about 5% I see on the screen. It is DD Global, China really launching an investigation. Those headlines also making investors pretty nervous, Caroline.
Yeah, interesting, DD beating up on its own just after its listing here in the United States, American Depository Receipts on the downside. Tell you what's all been up for the first time this week was the US dollar. We're off by 0.5% for our radio audience. I'm looking at your global macro movers, and it was a story of dollar weakness as we got that sort of Goldilocks jobs data, as Carol was talking about. Not worried too much about the Federal Reserve having to run too fast in terms of rate hikes. The Canadian dollar is your outperformance, up 0.9% as oil catches a bid. Aussie dollar as well. Kiwi, basically, it is commodity-related currency pairs that did well. The Kiwi up 0.9%. Let's go across to those commodities now, because it is a sea of green on my screen. Brent crude up 0.5%. Remember, OPEC Plus back to the drawing board, debating as to what we'll see in terms of production. Increases slowly, but that's what we're looking to get an agreement on as soon as Monday. Gas oil up more than a percentage point. Heating oil, remember, we're all, of course, also using our air conditioning as we see heat ravage not only the US, but also China. And steel up 0.6%. It was a strong day for commodities. And we also see a strong day for global bonds. Taylor, yields falling across the board, whether you're in Austria, Greece, Belgium, Switzerland, you name it, they were down.
Unbelievable. You saw, of course, the bond markets close at 2 p.m., so we can make this quick. Bonds catch a bid, yields fall today, and they fall on the week. Take a look at this. Every single day this week, you've seen the 10s fall from a 152 to a 142. 30s fall from a 215 to a 204. Carol, this is the theme.
Yeah.
The bonds catching a bid despite some of this Goldilocks scenario that we've seen today. The Fed's not going anywhere.
No, exactly. That's what that report gave them. It gave the Fed some room. They keep saying we're going to be watching this, but it gave them room. Nothing's too hot, nothing's too cold, that they can kind of continue the course. I do wonder about, though, what happens come September. Everybody keeps pointing to it, including the Labor Secretary, Marty Walsh, who caught up with our team over on TV. Here's what he had to say about watching very much fall when kids get back to school.
I think we'll see more people participating in September because school's going back to work. But again, this month, in the month of June, we saw 850,000 American workers get back into the workforce. That's a good, solid number, and we want to continue that momentum as we move forward here in the months of July and August and September.
You know, we talked with, and that obviously was the Labor Secretary, Marty Walsh. We talked with Irina Novoselsky. She runs Career Builder. She said that there are so many companies looking to hire workers. There's not a lot of applications out there. It's just interesting, and we'll see if the numbers start to change come September.
Yeah, we have to keep a close eye on what happens in terms of September, in terms of the back-to-school trade. Also, though, I mean, what's going to be happening is we build up towards people wanting to go out and enjoy themselves. Of course, we saw leisure, hospitality, the outperformer when it came to the jobs data. We're all going to be out celebrating this weekend, Shonali. It really feels as though the money is back on July the 4th, and how we're all going to be spending it.
Yeah, that money coming back might be good news. We see these record low volumes and record low, this ultra low VIX going to impact those banks over there. They're going to report earnings in just a couple of weeks here, already thinking about what that might look like.
Shonali, are you glazing over the fact that Caroline calls hamburgers beef patties?
Yeah,
Caroline,
definitely did glaze
hamburgers.
right over that fact.
I forget what's lost in translation with you guys, and I second guess myself. And beef patties, I'd never called it a beef patty in my life in the UK. We call it hamburger, but I wondered whether you guys called it something different. Tomatoes, tomatoes.
Carol, as we push forward, of course, the all-important pops coming up.
Yeah, exactly. Alex Steele is there, Romaine Bostick. They're not here, but they've been teasing it throughout the day. It's incredible performances. It's the Boston Pops with their traditions that they normally are doing in Boston, but because of the pandemic, they've got this great celebration in Tanglewood. So catch it on Bloomberg Radio and Bloomberg TV. That is 8 o'clock on Sunday. So looking forward to that. Guys, you have a good weekend and have some beef patties.
Or non-meat, should you wish.
Or burgers. All right, that'll do it for our cross-platform coverage. Beyond the Bell on Bloomberg Radio, Bloomberg TV, and on YouTube. We'll see you again on Tuesday. Same time, same place. Safe holiday, everyone.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Masser and Bloomberg Quick Takes Tim Stenovic on Bloomberg Radio.
So wrapping up quite a week when it comes to the trade. S&P 500 hitting a record for a 7th straight day. First time that we've seen that since 1997, and those equity averages finishing pretty much just off their highs of this session. For the 5 days overall, the Dow was up 1%, the S&P 500 a gain of 1.7%. Tech names, once again, they are in favor. That growth play, that tech trade, that's where investors have been allocating a lot more money and buying into. The NASDAQ was up 1.9% for the week overall. Again, next week, though, we'll get some more indications of maybe what the Fed was thinking at that last Fed meeting, because we will get those FOMC minutes. And then we're not too far away from the first round of second quarter earnings reports. Of course, Dave Wilson talking about it earlier. We're looking for earnings in the second quarter, at least the S&P 500 companies, to be up 64.5%. We're looking for that kind of earnings growth. Again, those comparisons pretty easy. All right, off to world and national news we go, and off to Nancy Lyons in D.C. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. President Biden says the latest jobs report is a sign the nation's recovery is picking up steam.
This is historic progress, pulling our economy out of the worst crisis in 100 years.
Biden says the 850,000 jobs that were added in June are a direct result of the stimulus bill passed earlier this year. The National Transportation Safety Board says it will investigate a mishap for a Boeing cargo jet this morning off the coast of Hawaii. Bloomberg's Nathan Hager has more from Washington.
The NTSB says it's sending a team of 7 investigators to look into the water landing for a Boeing 737 operated by Transair. The Federal Aviation Administration says the 2 pilots of the 46-year-old jet reported engine trouble and tried to return to Honolulu before ditching their plane in the Pacific. The U.S. Coast Guard rescued both pilots. This is the second major mishap for a Boeing 737 this year. A crash off the coast of Indonesia back in January killed all on board. That Boeing model was even older than the one in Hawaii. In Washington, I'm Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
Rescue teams are feverishly working at the site of the South Florida condo collapse before Hurricane Elsa moves in. The storm could hit Florida by Tuesday. The death toll in the condo collapse is now up to 20. Alvin Bragg is poised to be Manhattan's first black district attorney. His final opponent has conceded the race. Bragg could also be the person who takes the reins of the prosecution of former President Donald Trump. Current DA Cyrus Vance Jr. has chosen to leave after 3 terms. Just yesterday, Vance filed multiple charges against the Trump Organization and its CFO. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries.
All right, Nance, thank you so much. Our Bloomberg Business Week Weekend Show features an interview that we did with Beth Simone Novick. She's the first Chief Innovation Officer of the state of New Jersey. She's got a book out. It's called Solving Public Problems, A Practical Guide to Fix Our Government and Change Our World. Keep in mind, she also worked for the Obama administration. There, she was U.S. Deputy Chief Technology Officer for Open Government. Here's a little clip of the interview and where Novick shares her thoughts on improving government. Check it out. As a citizen of the United States, as someone who has lived in New Jersey her whole life, I have seen a fair amount of dysfunction in government. Does government work right now? And if it doesn't, in your view, or are there ways that it could work better in your view?
Well, again, there are lots of things, there are lots of success stories that I can tell you. But at the same time, regardless of those stories, most people today feel that government is a clumsy, bungling giant that is not in a position to spend its money well, as we stand poised today to have one of the largest federal budgets since World War I, really. I think all of us are very concerned about how government spends our money. And, you know, that's reflected in the poll numbers, which over, not just since COVID, but over a generation have seen declining rates of trust in government. So as many things as are going right, and we're all looking around us as New York and New Jersey are reopening, and go to a restaurant and whatnot, we see the benefits again of when things work, but we know that they could work better than they're doing today, and especially we know that we need to take advantage of the tools we have available today, big data, new technology, human-centered design, again, innovations in ways of working that we need to adapt and adopt in order to do a better job at solving problems.
And that's Beth Simone Novick, Chief Innovation Officer of the state of New Jersey. Her book that is just out, Solving Public Problems, A Practical Guide to Fix Our Government and Change Our World. She understands as having worked within the Obama administration. You can hear more of that interview. It's on our weekend show on Bloomberg Radio and also on our podcast feed at Bloomberg.com. I'm Carol Masser in our Interactive Brokers studio, and this is Bloomberg Radio. Catch Bloomberg Wall Street Week with David Weston. That's tonight at 6 p.m. Wall Street time. This week's show focusing on the state of the U.S. labor market and the stability of financial institutions. That's Wall Street Week tonight at 6 with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio. It is 4:15 on Wall Street. That means it's time for Drive Time Traffic. Happens every 15 minutes right here on Bloomberg Radio. It's a little gray and gloomy at Kalegi. West Hudson River crossing to New Jersey. A little gloomy there, too.
Well, that question today, which is the best Hudson River crossing, is kind of like asking, which is your favorite, spinach, asparagus, or Brussels sprouts? Ugh,
I
none
like
of them are
all
good.
of them.
You do?
I do.
Really?
Yeah, I know. I'm
I
a
like
little
broccoli.
crazy.
I mean, the other three, I mean, that's like, all
right.
It's terrible. Anyway. Lincoln Tunnel's at 35 minutes. We'll call that the spinach. That's the one I can bear the most. The Holland Tunnel is an hour. That's the asparagus. The Brussels sprouts, the George Washington Bridge, because the bridge might as well be in Montreal because you can't get there. The west side's a heavy ride. From the 40s on up, the east side is packed from the 30s on up. And so looks like that ride at the Lincoln Tunnel really the best you're going to get. Bloomberg 11:30 3-day weather forecast. Tonight, showers 60 to 65 for a low. Saturday, chance of a shower or a thunderstorm, high 70 to 75. Independence Day, partly sunny, high 75 to 80. And Monday, sunshine, high 85 to 90. Right now in Central Park, the skies are cloudy. Carol calls them gloomy. And the temperature 78 degrees. With the best ride in and out of the city and lessons on vegetables, I'm Ed Kalegi, Bloomberg 1130. Bloomberg Business Week continues.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Stocks make history. S&P scoring 7 records in a row, up today by 32 points. Ending the week, heading into a long holiday weekend at 33.52. Risk on this Jobs Friday. S&P up by 0.75%, extending the year-to-date gain to 15.8%. Stocks rallied on speculation the economy is recovering at a pace that won't make the Fed imminently take away the liquidity punch bowl that has helped push the market to a record. The Dow up 152, up 0.4%. NASDAQ up 117, up by 0.8%. Also a record for the NASDAQ 100 index, up today by 1.1%. A retreat for the Russell 2000, down by 1%. 10-year yield last quoted 1.42%. Gold up 0.7%, 17.88 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.1%, 75.17 a barrel. Again, records on Wall Street. Jobs Friday. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is Bloomberg Business Flash.
You are indeed. All right, Charlie, thanks so much. Well, there's a new episode of the Portrait Series on Bloomberg Quick Take that is out. The latest episode, is on Charles D. King. He's a producer. He's known for the film Judas and the Black Messiah and a lot more. That film, by the way, became the first Best Picture nominee with an all-black producing team. And here's some of that episode of Portrait with Charles D. King, where he talks about his own company and his approach to it.
Over time, we created this thing called the macro rubric, and there's 6 key points that we look for. At the center of every one of the projects, people of color must be at the center of it, either the lead, co-lead, the driving through line, and, people of color on a broad sense, African-American, Latinx, Asian, the wide different demographic that I call of the new majority. And so we choose project 1 that have people of color at the center of them, projects that have a level of excellence in storytelling. And the other thing we, of course, look for, all of the years of experience, is we're looking at what is the business opportunity for them. We're going to take some calculated risk, but here's where the upside opportunity is for it.
And that is the producer, Charles D. King. It's also the next installment of the Portrait Series on Bloomberg Quick Take. And behind that Portrait Series is Bloomberg Quick Take Chief Correspondent Jason Kelly, of course, my old partner in crime. He joins me on the Axis line in Sleepy Hollow. This is so on brand for you, the type of things you're interested in. Tell us, though, Jason specifically, why you wanted to sit down with him.
Well, hi, Carol.
Hi.
Nice to be with you.
Nice to have you here.
Pre-4th of July.
Exactly.
It's interesting. First of all, it was so amazing to actually sit down with someone. I got to go and spend some time with Charles at his home in Los Angeles. Then we actually took a little road trip to another part of Beverly Hills and stood outside his first office at WME, William Morris and Associates, where he started in the mailroom. This is a guy who grew up in Decatur, Georgia, went to Vanderbilt, went to Howard, got a law degree. And the reason I wanted to tell the story, to actually answer your question, is because I think we have spent a lot of time collectively thinking about representation on screen. And I wanted to look at representation behind the camera, and most importantly, and you and I have been doing this for a long time, following the money. Who's holding the purse strings? And the answer, Charles King.
Well, that is why. How did he get there, though? How difficult was that process?
You know, it was an interesting process because it goes back to actually him being a kid and seeing, this is going to be a little bit of a throwback for you and me. Remember L.A. Law?
Yes.
Remember the Blair Underwood character?
Yes.
He basically watched L.A. Law as a kid and said, hold on, there's a black lawyer. That guy looks like me. I could do that. He goes to law school but even when he was at Vanderbilt as an undergrad, he sort of got bit by the entertainment bug. And so he knew he wanted to be in that business. And someone eventually said to him, look, you would make a great agent. Why don't you head out? And you know that the way you have to start in the business is literally in the mailroom. You start in the mailroom, then you become an assistant, then you become a junior agent, then you become an agent. But he had this meteoric rise there at what is now known as, Endeavor. And what he saw was this opportunity to literally represent people who weren't being represented. And so he ends up representing Tyler Perry and many others. And then ultimately, he goes out on his own to say, you know what, I want to be the guy putting all of this together.
Right. And you know what's interesting? I love what you said about L.A. Law, because Jason, how many conversations have you and I had about the importance of having these role models, but the importance of visually being able to see role models, whether it's where you work, where you go to school, or whether what you're watching up on the big screen or on streaming. People of all walks of life need to see people like themselves doing things.
Right. And I think what's really important about that, too, is, a Tyler Perry or an Oprah or a Shonda Rhimes, these are generational talents, right? I mean, these are lightning in a bottle in many ways. And Charles would be the first to say, listen, he's a very talented guy, but there are a lot more opportunities to be an agent or be a producer or, be somehow involved in that ecosystem. And you can make a huge impact in that business world. And I will tell you, in terms of the reaction that I'm getting to this piece, that's one of the things that's really coming back to me.
So are things getting better when it comes to Hollywood? How many times have we done stories, too, about, it's a very white Hollywood. He is behind the scenes. He's providing the money or providing the supply chain and infrastructure to get things done that in a more diverse way. Is it getting easier?
I think it's
what do you say it is?
A little bit easier. I mean, look, the results are going to have to speak for themselves. You talked about the historic nature of Judas and the Black Messiah. One of the cool things about this piece was I got to talk about Charles to both Ted Sarandos, the CEO of Netflix, as well as Ryan Coogler, of course, the director of Black Panther, who ended up being another producer on Judas. This was the project that Ryan Coogler said, I've got to do this. He got together with the director, Shaka King. They brought Charles King, no relation, into the mix. He raised the money. So that was historic, but we are not very far removed from hashtag Oscars so white. We know that.
Right.
The Academy is making some movement. Ultimately, the money does the talking. And I think one of the things that is happening is you are seeing that there is not just a domestic audience, but a global audience. All eyes, of course, are going to be on Ryan Coogler's next project. I spoke to him while he was in pre-production for Black Panther 2.
Oh, my God.
Wait.
I can't wait either. Hey, where can we find Quick Take and your portrait series?
So the portrait series, you can find it on our YouTube channel for Bloomberg Quick Take. You can also go to bloomberg.com/QT. And you can find it there. I'm sure it's on your Twitter feed because you're such a good supporter. It's on my Twitter feed as well. But yeah, a lot of fun and I think on brand, as you say, for what we've been trying to do.
Absolutely, and an important one. Jason, thank you so much. Jason Kelly, of course, chief correspondent for Bloomberg Quick Take on the Access line from Sleepy Holly. Portrait can be seen, as Jason mentioned, via Bloomberg Quick Take's YouTube page as well as bloomberg.com/QT. Check it out on Charles D. King. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119. And around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
So we're going to talk about jets, specifically selling and buying of jets. We're going to check in with the founder and president of Par Avion. She will be with us in just a moment. What kind of activity she is seeing, especially as the world continues to slowly but increasingly reopen after the pandemic. First up, though, let's get another check on those closing numbers on Wall Street, wrapping up the week ahead of the long holiday weekend. Charlie, in a word, records.
Indeed, best level of the day. One more word for you, fireworks. Fireworks ahead of the 4th today on Wall Street. S&P up for a 7th straight day. Records for a 7th straight day. First time that has happened since 1997. Stocks rallied on speculation. The economy is recovering at a pace that will not make the Federal Reserve imminently take away the liquidity punch bowl that has helped push the market to a record. Now, as for the economic backdrop on this Jobs Friday, Eric Stein is CIO of Income at Eaton Vance. He was our guest right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
You have the momentum, cyclical momentum that we're seeing as we come out of COVID, hopefully, variants notwithstanding, come out of COVID. So a lot of cyclical momentum in the economy. And then from an asset price perspective, it's, how do you look at that as well as intersection of monetary policy, fiscal policy, and whatnot.
And this morning we got data showing job growth surged the most in 10 months. The unemployment rate edged up to 5.9%. The report bolstered views the central bank will not be rushing to taper its stimulus program anytime soon. So today, the S&P 500 index up 32, up by about 0.8%. The Dow up 152, up 0.4%. NASDAQ up 116, up by 0.8%. NASDAQ 100 index up 1.1%. Again, just to be clear, the Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ 100 index all at records. But on the minus side, Russell 2000 lower today's small caps tumbling by 1%. Recapping, S&P up 0.75% ahead of the weekend. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Russell's still up about 17% this year, though, so maybe a little bit of a breather. All right, Charlie, great breakdown. Thank you so much. So this next guest we talked to, I think it was around last August, and we know a lot has happened since then around the world. In some parts, we're seeing increasingly reopenings and more post-pandemic. We are doing so, though, with a cautious eye, watching that Delta variant, as we talked about earlier, with Dr. Ian Lustbader over at the NYU Langone Medical Center. Here with, though, how all of this is impacting the air travel space. We're delighted to have back with us Janine Yanarelli. She's founder and president of Par Avion. She represents international buyers and sellers of pre-owned business jets. She is back with us on the phone from Houston. Janine, nice to have you here. A lot has happened in the past year. How are you? And give us some perspective on the last 10, 11, 12 months for you.
Happy to join you again this afternoon. Wow, what a difference not even a year makes, but really the activity level ratcheted up, I would say, mid-fourth quarter and has not let up. It was absolutely unprecedented and continues to be so.
Specifically what? And who's doing what?
Well, private individuals. I would say that the bulk of the buyers for business and private aircraft today are still individuals, entrepreneurs. The driver last year was really COVID. Mm-hmm. That was a motivation for an individual to create what we refer to as a health corridor. How do I get from point A to point B relatively safely, and how do I control my environment? Well, that's relatively easily done through private jet travel. That continued into the fourth quarter, but I would say the drivers became a little bit different towards the end of the fourth quarter. Some of that was change in administration. That's always something that a little bit rocks the aircraft sales marketplace. Mm-hmm. But after that, it became an appetite for travel. I mean, the impact comes from the decline in airline service,
right.
The cutting of routes, the cancellations that you're now seeing. I think people are thinking they made a wise bet when they bought their own airplane.
Will that continue, though, as the airline industry increasingly ramps up? I mean, we know some of the predicaments. We've heard it from some of the carriers. Not enough pilots who need to get back into the simulator and get their hours back up. I mean, obviously, there's an adjustment in the supply chain of everything as the economy, which was shut down completely and is reopening. Do you anticipate that's going to have an impact on what you will see in terms of activity?
Oh, absolutely. And this is not a problem that is easily solved. I mean, just because demand is back, the airlines can't go simply flip a switch and put back online all the aircraft that they retired, or I should say placed into preservation at the height of the pandemic, and the number of crew members that they furloughed. This is going to be a multi-year requirement for them in order to return to pre-pandemic levels.
You talked about individuals and entrepreneurs buying. Is this U.S., international? Give me an idea of the demographics. Break it down as much as you can. Bloomberg, we love to know specifics.
So the bulk of the activity in the resale marketplace for business aircraft has always been North America, even more so today. I think at this particular moment, North America is accounting for about 75% of the global aircraft sales. Part of what we're seeing is a slow return to the market by those countries that are now opening back up. And the first ramp up you'll see is in for hire. By that I mean those who are chartering aircraft or buying into the fractional share or club programs. It will take a global reopening before we see a real resurgence in aircraft sales activity outside of the continental United States. But for the moment, the appetite is extremely strong here, and demand is outstripping supply.
What's demand is, okay. And that can also create dislocations for you. Do you anticipate a sales slowdown because there isn't the supply out there?
Good observation. It has become the concern of people in the trade today is that how good can this year be if, in fact, we can't get our hands on airplanes? Well, I think it's relative. It's sort of cyclical, even among aircraft brokers. You know, one particular quarter you're extraordinarily busy and then it's quiet. And I think the same will continue. Hard to say. New aircraft are a challenge to get your hands on. In fact, you're probably looking at several years out before you can take delivery, even if you place an order at this time. So really the focus is on the pre-owned aircraft marketplace.
All right, and pre-owned, this isn't like, you know, the used car, you kick the tires, you get a great deal. I mean, give us an idea. What's a typical pre-owned aircraft? What do you get? What's the maker? What does it cost?
Well, it depends on what one is after, but let's talk about something in the mid-size, super mid-size category, which I happen to be very well versed in at the moment because I'm offering two for sale. So I have an aircraft that is 17 years old and another one that is at 22 years old. They are coast-to-coast capability. They're actually intercontinental capability, but it'll require a stop, for example, if you're going off the East Coast into Europe. They are state-of-the-art. They are mid-range on their inspection cycles. This is all important considerations because it points towards the actual cost of the aircraft.
Janine, hang on for a second because I want to talk a little bit more about it because I love the picture that you're painting for our listeners and our viewers on YouTube. But I do have to do a little bit of news. We'll come right back and continue with the founder and president of Par Avion, Janine Yanarelli. We'll get back to her in just a moment. Right now, though, back to D.C. and Nancy Lyons with a check on World and National News. Hey, Nance.
Hey, Carol. On the eve of America's foundational holiday, President Biden today at the White House administered the oath to 21 immigrants, 6 of them in the military, as new U.S. citizens. Bloomberg's Irv Chapman reports from Washington.
I hereby declare on oath that
Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas, himself a naturalized citizen, led the oath-taking. President Biden recalled his own antecedents who left impoverished Ireland in 1849.
Thank you for choosing the United States of America, believing that America is worthy of your aspirations. It's dreams of immigrants like you that built America and continue to inject new energy, new vitality. Immigration has always been essential to America.
The president spoke of the comprehensive immigration bill he has already submitted to Congress. In Washington, Irv Chapman, Bloomberg Radio.
The Supreme Court will not hear a case over whether businesses have a right to refuse services for same-sex wedding ceremonies. The case involved a Washington state woman who refused to provide flowers for a same-sex wedding, arguing it violated her religious beliefs. American champion Sha'Carri Richardson cannot run in the Olympic 100-meter race after testing positive for a chemical found in marijuana. She soundly won the 100 at the Olympic trials. She spoke about the ban on the Today Show today and says she smoked marijuana as a way of coping with her mother's recent death.
Don't judge me because I am human. I'm you. I just happen to run a little faster.
Richardson accepted a 30-day suspension that ends July 27th, which would be in time to run in the women's relays. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Bloomberg Quick Take, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Nancy Lyons.
So our Bloomberg Business Week weekend radio show and podcast features a couple of industries hard hit. We talk about the restaurant industry. We also talk, though, about the cruise industry, and it is slowly getting clearances to set sail again around the globe and from the U.S. shore. So on our weekend show, we caught up with Richard Fain, CEO of Royal Caribbean Cruises. In this excerpt, Mr. Fain explains why it's safe to set sail on a cruise again.
And all the things that were concerned 15 months ago and made us voluntarily stop operating now work in our favor. So unlike going into a movie theater or a restaurant or a theme park, we know everybody who's coming on board, and we can take the time to make sure that they're vaccinated and tested, etc. So on this ship, on all of our ships, every crew member is vaccinated. All the adults have to be vaccinated on this ship. We have some children who aren't eligible for the vaccine, but the net result is that 99% of the on board is vaccinated. So that's the first line of defense. But the second one, as you pointed out before, people aren't as much worried about getting sick as they're worried about somebody else getting sick and ruining their vacation and them being quarantined or what have you. So we set up the procedures. We've set up procedures with the public health system, with hospitals, with everything else. So if we have a case, we can do contact tracing in a way you can't do on shore. We can isolate in a way you can't do on shore. And so a case doesn't become an outbreak. It just becomes a few people who are set aside, flown home, and everybody else carries on with their vacation.
And that was Richard Fain, Chairman and CEO of Royal Caribbean Cruises, what they are doing to keep people safe on those cruise ships. You can hear more of that interview on our weekend show on Bloomberg Radio and on our podcast feed at Bloomberg.com. By the way, he was aboard the Celebrity Edge cruise ship. It was docked at the time in Costa Maya, Mexico, as we had that conversation. All right, you're listening to Bloomberg Radio.
markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and at Bloomberg Quick Take. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Bloomberg World Headquarters. I'm Charlie Pellet. Want to begin with oil and OPEC Plus's abandoned efforts to break a deadlock within the cartel for a second night, increasing the risk its failure to act will unleash an inflationary spike in oil prices. Negotiations will continue on Monday. Stocks climbed to records today on speculation the economy is recovering at a pace that will not make the Fed imminently take away the liquidity punch bowl that has helped push the market to a record. Now, in a feat that has not been seen since 1997, the S&P 500 index closed at a record for a seventh straight day. S&P up 32 today to end the week, heading into the weekend at 43.52, a gain of about 0.7%. The Dow up 152, up by 0.4. NASDAQ up 116, up by 0.8%. Gold up 0.6%, 17.87 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.2%, 75.09 a barrel. Brent 76.11, a gain there of 0.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie, burgers or dogs on July 4th?
None of the above, believe it or not. Yeah,
What?
You know what? Beer. It's the logical.
No,
choice.
food I'm talking about. I'm not talking about drink.
All right, yeah. Let's go for. I try to avoid meat, so that's it's not really a choice. So
You're no more fun. Hey, private planes or a cruise ship? What would you do?
oh man, yeah, you know what? It's not an either or. Private plane.
Give
to
me
the
it all.
No, private plane to the cruise ship, baby. That's the way I'm traveling.
And I get off the cruise ship and I want to be back on the private plane. All right, we're going to get back to talking about private planes. Charlie, thank you. Still with us is Janine Yanarelli. She's founder and president of Par Avion. Still with us on the phone from Houston. And forgive me, Janine, I interrupted you. You were talking about two planes that you've got for sale. One's, I think, 17 years old. One's 22 years old. Continue, because I think our audience wants to know, what are you selling?
Well, these aircraft fall into that mid-size category. They're known as Falcon 50 EXs. And, even though when you hear the words 17 years and 22 years, that's really not that old. We focus more on what is the overall total time and the overall care of the aircraft. And private jets, as you can imagine, are, let's say, babied a bit more than your commercial airliners. They just don't work as hard as a commercial airliner aircraft does. So consequently, we're not faced with some of the same maintenance issues on a very rapid, reoccurring basis. All that being said...
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to give you a price point today for those airplanes.
Sure.
It's going to fall between $4 and $4.5 million. And that certainly represents an appreciation from what those aircraft might have been worth fourth quarter of 2020.
So, one of the things that we've talked a lot about, and you said that part of the reason maybe people are tapping into the private jet market a little bit more is also the slow recovery in the commercial airline space, and some of what's holding back commercial airlines is access to workers. How about in your world? Because you can buy a private plane, but if you don't have a great private pilot who can fly it or engineers to take care of it, it's not going to do you any good.
Very good point. I mean, the supply of qualified personnel is going to impact the aviation industry across the spectrum. I would say for the moment that while flight departments, established flight departments, are struggling and thinking about the next generation, they're well established enough at this point in time that they can manage the uplifts they currently are responsible for. But the future is very, very uncertain. There are entities, some of the fractional shares, the club memberships, they're offering bonuses, signing bonuses. Charter operators are taking on pilots, junior pilots, let's call it, starting out with far fewer accumulated hours than they might have 5 years ago, but all of that is in an effort to feed the pipeline, to train them, to indoctrinate them into the industry, and to hopefully retain them, because there is some jumping between the private aviation industry and the airline industry, back and forth. Some pilots would prefer a schedule, and when you fly the airlines, at least you have a set schedule. But private aircraft is more of a as-needed basis. I mean, that's the whole purpose of having that aircraft. It is, for some people, simply a luxury, but for others, it is an absolute business tool.
Janine, company has been around for almost 25 years. You've seen this industry grow, change, different players come in and out. What observations can you make about it that you think might be of interest to our audience?
Well, for me, one of the most striking is the rise of individuals who buy aircraft as opposed to corporations, particularly since the economic meltdown. I mean, this is sort of a phenomenon that started way back 2009, 2010, and has continued. And really, the depth of that has been realized within the last couple of years, that it continues, where you have a lot of solopreneurs, you have heads of companies, whether they're private or publicly traded, that decide that this is a means of transportation they absolutely cannot live without. For me, that is the most significant change, which probably also points to the fact the sector of the market that we've yet to see, or I should say the type of buyer return to the marketplace, is the corporate buyer. But they're coming.
But not yet.
Not yet, but they will. And
Why do you say that? Because they don't have to anymore. And it's also, those activist investors are very quick to say, do you really need a private jet when you can have a fractional ownership, or, you know, when you really need it? And actually, after the pandemic, we now know, yes, a CEO has to be around the globe if they're a global company, but they can also pop on things virtually. I wonder what impact that might have on future business travel, even for senior executives going forward.
Oh, I think you're going to see a return to in-person meeting. I think everyone is Zoomed out. You've probably heard that before. But it's more than that, especially if you're in a very personable selling business. You need that face-to-face. Deals are made across the table still. They're not necessarily made long distance. And it's not just the C-suite that's making use of an aircraft. I mean, it has been opened up to middle management, to key personnel, to customers in a way to efficiently and expeditiously move key personnel between various points. Case in point is a company, a consumer goods company I work with on the East Coast. Their route is multiple destinations within one day. I mean, these are true working horse airplanes that they use. They fill every single seat. They do more than one stop in the course of a day. It would be absolutely impossible to do it with scheduled airline service, and cut the trip to several days as opposed to more than a week and probably half the destinations if they sent everyone out on the airlines. I mean, it's an absolute crucial tool for their continued survival and competitiveness.
All right. And most of the purchases, I got to ask you, is it mostly by men?
Predominantly so, but you know, when you're working with a corporation, it's a buying group, and the buying group is a collection of, well, the gatekeeper, the C-suite office, the legal, and you know, then it's 50-50 men and women.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's good to hear. Hey, listen, have a great holiday. Thanks for checking in with us, and nice to hear some optimism. Things definitely have progressed since we talked last August. Janine Iannarelli, she's founder and president of Par Avion, joining us on the phone from Houston, Texas. So coming up at 5 p.m. Wall Street time is Sound On with Joe Matthew. And might you talk about the jobs report today?
I think we're going to get to it. We might even add the labor secretary. Marty Walsh will join us coming up after the top of the hour here. A lot of questions about what's inside this report. A lot of questions about why people aren't coming back, right?
It's a Goldilocks report. There's something for everyone. The
well, isn't that true?
Happy.
Speaking of Goldilocks on that private jet, I don't know. I'm picturing myself right now. I'm going to blame you for this when I start doing this on a regular basis.
Hey, honey, I have an idea of how we spend our next bonus.
That's right. Fractional ownership.
Or just buy one all out together. Just a few $1 million.
I'm going to talk to my boss about that.
All right. Yeah. Tell me how you work it, how that works out for you.
Hey, happy 4th.
Thank
I hope you have
you.
a great holiday. I'll see you next week.
You too. Have a good one and a safe one, and we'll see you next week. Joe Matthew, coming your way at 5 p.m. Wall Street time, right here on Bloomberg Radio. All right, that's going to do it for us. It was a record day on Wall Street. Have a great and safe holiday. Be sure to catch the Bloomberg Television and Radio Boston Pops Spectacular celebrating the July 4th holiday. That's all on Sunday at 8 p.m. For the whole Bloomberg Business Week team, have a good and safe evening. Enjoy the holiday. I'm Carol Masser.